It was the summer of 1977. I remember sitting in a car, smoking a joint in Paterson, New Jersey. I was 17 and a friend of mine started talking to me about Jesus. He was talking to me about the gospel, who Jesus was and what he did. I never imagined what God started in me at that moment would end up being Christian Faith Fellowship Church. It was soon after that conversation in the car that I went and bought my first Bible at a church on Rifle Camp Road in Clifton. I remember opening the Bible in the attic of my house, lighting up a joint, and reading the book of Revelation. Man, did I get a revelation. The more I read, the hungrier I got. First for some food, but also to know more of who God was and what the gospel was all about. I was working at Pathmark at the time, and that's where I met Bob Buse. I asked a lot of questions and he got me connected with a group called the Hedge of Love, where I met his future wife, Gail. I started serving any chance I could. I would set up chairs, operate the tape duplicating table, do the soundboard. I got busy there. Anytime the doors were open, I made a point to be there. I began to sense a call in my life to pastor a church one day, but it honestly seemed impossible. I don't even know what to do with those thoughts when they came into my mind. I would drive at times up to High Point State Park from Paterson to spend some quiet time with God, and I prayed. I remember it being so quiet, but I never thought the hills, the towns, the homes that I stretched my hand over would one day be the area that God would call me to pastor. I started attending Calvary Temple in Wayne, New Jersey, and I met this good-looking secretary in the church office one day. She was only supposed to be in New Jersey for a short period before moving back to Michigan, but God had some different plans. Our first date was a church service, not a movie or not even a romantic dinner, which kind of sums up our life with God and each other. But that night when I dropped her off at her sister's house, she kissed me on the lips. She says no, but I'll tell you she did. Diane and I got married 1 year later, and we are now celebrating our 35th year of marriage. Soon, our 3 children, Rebecca, Jennifer, and Daniel, came along, and God led us to Faith Fellowship in Edison, where we served as teachers in the Bible school, mission work. We also worked on the altar team. In July of 1987, we moved to Wantage and started attending Christian Faith Fellowship Family Church in Middletown, New York. I began working for Pastor Joe and Miss Lynn as the youth and children's director, cleaning and whatever else needed to be done. Children's ministry was a lot of fun, but I don't think Pastor Joe appreciated the carpet being set on fire and some of the other crazy things we did with some of them explosions.
I remember that in our conversations from time to time, Lynn and I would say, you know, Tom's got the goods. He someday is going to walk in and tell us he's done and he's going to go start his own ministry. We didn't know how all that was going to happen and operate, but after several years, we did have a conversation.
After 5 years of living in Wantage and traveling back and forth to Middletown, we felt like God was leading us to start a work in our community that we lived in. I remembered being scared to even talk with it out loud with Diane. We had a great job at Christian Faith Fellowship Family Church, and we loved our church, but we had a strong desire to see a church that shared the good news of the gospel in Sussex County. At that time, there weren't many churches in our area proclaiming the good news of the gospel. After trying to pray that desire away for a few months, I realized it wasn't going to go away. I finally worked up the courage to talk to Pastor Joe about what we believed God was leading us to do.
When he told me he was going to, thinking about starting a church, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to respond. And so I remember calling my pastor and saying, hey, what do you do when you have a staff member, a key staff member, tell you they're thinking about starting their own ministry? And he said, well, it's important as the pastor, you set the schedule, you set the timetable. He said, when's he planning on doing this? I said, I really don't know. All I know is that he's talking about starting a church. And so he said, well, you just set him down and tell him he's got 2 weeks. And so the following week, after we had talked initially, I asked Tom, I said, well, what's your timetable? What are you thinking about? And he said, oh, probably in about a year. And I remember looking at him and saying, well, you got 2 weeks.
On July 4th, 1993, 17 people met in our living room for CFFC's first service. It was a far cry from the sanctuary that we worship in today. Probably 10 of the 17 people that came that Sunday were family members, but it didn't stop us. We knew God had big plans. Our family room served as our sanctuary. Diane played the keyboard. She led praise and worship. Daniel's bedroom served as our children's ministry, and our driveway was the parking lot. We had church on Sunday morning. We had church on Wednesday night, and we had a prayer service every Tuesday evening. The beginning felt really small sometimes, but we knew God was in it. After a month of meeting in our house, the Lord opened a larger facility for us to meet in. We began renting the basement of the Sparta Ambulance Building in Sparta, New Jersey. It was just built, and we were excited to have a place with more than one toilet and to have, didn't have to move our couches and things anymore. We loaded our minivan up every Sunday morning with sound equipment, instruments, Bibles, everything that we needed to have church service, and we set it up and broke it down every week. Within a year, the church grew to about 100 people. We were actually a portable church before it was cool to be a portable church. We eventually started renting both floors of the ambulance building, with the adults meeting upstairs, the children meeting downstairs. The Lord continued to bless the church and gave us our church vision statement to be a praying church, a going church, and a life-changing church. The church continued to grow, and lives were being impacted with the gospel. I can remember the strange feeling of being surprised and not surprised all at the same time. I wasn't surprised that God could do it, but I was surprised that he could do it through us. God saw more in us than we ever saw in ourselves, and we counted it an awesome, amazing blessing to be trusted with this work by him. We saw people making decisions for Christ, people getting water baptized, growing in their faith. It was exciting and scary all at the same time. In 1995, we were given the opportunity to rent the old Monroe Bible Chapel on here, Route 94, and the church relocated again. This facility was bigger in a prime location right in the middle of Sussex County on a major road. 1 year after that move, the owner of the property asked us to lunch. I remember being nervous. I was positive he was going to ask us to move again because he needed the building back for his business. As we sat at lunch waiting for the news, he began to tell us how it was evident that the hand of God was upon the church, and he offered to sell us the building. We sat in disbelief and with a heavy heart. We wanted to buy the building, but knew a bank wouldn't give us a loan since the church was so small and we couldn't afford it. He looked across the table and he offered to hold a note himself so that the church could purchase the property. We paid it off in a few short years, and the church continues to grow and see people get saved and disciple. That property is now our home, the home of the CFFC campus. In the year 2000, we began our first expansion project, and we increased our sanctuary seating from 120 people to 450 people with room for children and youth ministry. We even built a fellowship hall that eventually became our children's ministry because we were growing faster than we could keep up with. Week after week, we saw people come through those doors, experience the power of the life-changing gospel, and grab hold of the truth that God had for them. By 2008, things started to get tight again. The fellowship hall became the children's main meeting room, and we were using every square inch of the building. We were running out of places to put people, and things started to feel small. But God was in it. It was exciting, but yet stressful. Sometimes the parking lot would even test your salvation. But it was an exciting time. Unfortunately, we were completely surrounded by land that couldn't be developed, and we were faced with an immovable mountain. We couldn't add on to our building, and we were running out of space. But God started moving. I can't even remember how it all came together. He was showing up every weekend, and then he just started showing off. Soon, the church owned the property surrounding it, and we had all the necessary permits and paperwork to begin a new building. The facility that housed our main meeting space today, we couldn't believe what God was doing. We were building an 800-person sanctuary, youth ministry, children's area, and yet the memories of those 17 people in our family room seemed so close. It wasn't little anymore, but God was still in it. Today, almost 1,500 people worship in this very sanctuary every week. Thousands of people have made decisions for Jesus, and thousands of people have proclaimed their faith in Jesus in water baptism. Kids that grew up in the children's ministry are on staff or they're serving in ministries around our country. And you know what? God isn't done yet. People look at this and sometimes make comments about how big the church is now. And I just think back to 17 faith-filled people in my living room, praising God, trusting God, giving Him our very best. And if He has done that with 17 people in 25 years, I can't wait to see what He's going to do with the thousands that worship every week now in the next 25 years.